Welcome to Preemptive Strike, the show where we look at the first hour of a JRPG to gauge the entertainment value of its opening act and gather statistical data to analyze the trends across different games. Join us as we journey through the rich history of JRPGs to see how their gameplay evolves and innovates from one game to the next. For each game, we'll examine how the first hour sets the tone for the rest of the journey, explore the ways in which the story and gameplay unfold to draw the player into the world and keep them coming back, as well as explain general tips, tricks, and trivia for a first-time player. Today, we'll discuss all of this and more on Preemptive Strike. Hello, and welcome to Preemptive Strike, everything you need to know about classic JRPGs before you play them. Today, we'll be talking about Final Fantasy. So Tyler, can you tell me something about Final Fantasy?
I could tell you quite a few things. Okay. Final Fantasy, released for the Famicom December 18th, 1987. It was released pretty similar time to around Dragon Quest II. And again, in context, like we talked about last time, like Zelda 2 was out in Japan at that time, Wizardry 3, Ultima 4.
Yeah, so that's kind of the RPGs that they had to go off of.
Yeah, so similar to Dragon Quest II as well, it didn't release for the NES for almost 3 years, and it released for the NES in July 1990. So because of this, Mario 3 was coming out in 90, so I feel like Final Fantasy would have done a little bit better in the West without Mario 3, but it did still sell very well, as we'll see a little bit later.
Yeah, and we'll definitely see that throughout the years as well in future Final Fantasy entries, that it kind of always had a stronger presence in the West.
Yeah, so finally we're getting to a game that wasn't published by or developed by Enix.
Yeah.
Final Fantasy was both developed and published by Square. Some notable staff members, we got Hironobu Sakaguchi, who was the director and writer. He ended up founding Mistwalker Studio later on in his career in 2004. And they've made games like Blue Dragon for the Xbox 360, Lost Odyssey, The Last Story, and Fantasian, which recently had that port on modern consoles. Other notable figures are in the staff. Yoshitaka Amano, doing a lot of the art, and Amano's art is just very iconic, like any of his pieces.
Yeah, those older Final Fantasy games really have a distinct style, especially the box art.
For sure. And then we got Nobuo Uematsu, who's the composer, and Chad, as he has in his notes, my man.
Yeah, Nobuo Uematsu is an amazing composer. Did you know that he only spent 5 minutes composing the prelude that you hear at the beginning of the game? So iconic.
I think I've heard that before, yeah.
Yeah, he only took 5 minutes to make it. To be fair, it is just a series of arpeggios, so from a music perspective, it's relatively simple, but it just goes together so well.
So Final Fantasy, if you wanted to buy it
careful what you say there, bucko.
Yeah. At release, it was $50 in the US, and in today's money, it's about $100. That'd be, or adjusting for inflation, that'd be about $119. And today, if you wanted to go ahead and buy that, just a secondhand market for a cartridge, you'd be paying about $25. And if you want a complete in box, with the manual and the cardboard it came in, it's about $150. So it's strange to think that it's more expensive than Dragon Warrior 1. It's pretty similar price-wise to Dragon Warrior 2, but I guess just popularity-wise, or there's just more competition for who wants to buy it. So then sales-wise, for the Famicom, it sold 520,000 in Japan whenever it released, and then by 1994 it ended up selling 600,000. And then for the overseas releases for the NES, it sold 700,000 by 1994, and then 780,000 by 2003. So we've been talking about the NES and the Famicom releases, but what other releases do you know of, Chad?
Oh man, if you want to play Final Fantasy 1, it's pretty easy because it came out on a ton of devices over the years. I mean, we have the MSX2 WonderSwan Color, as well as a number of portable devices such as phones throughout the years and other types of devices. I'd say one of the most notable releases was the GBA release, which came paired with Final Fantasy 2. That would be Final Fantasy 1 and 2 on the GBA was my first time playing the game. It also came out on the Wii Virtual Console, and if you want to play it in modern times, there's the Pixel Remaster, which is out on basically all modern platforms. And if you want to play the game, it shouldn't take you too long, although it is surprisingly beefy for an NES game. According to HowLongToBeat.com, It takes 15 and a half hours for the main story, 18 and a half hours for the main plus extra, and 19 and a half hours for completionist, although I'm not really sure what they count as completionist, and they might be factoring in the GBA Final Fantasy into that time as well.
I would assume completionist for this would just be like all the trophies, so the biggest time sink would just be getting all of the encounters, including the rare encounters.
That could be, but I'd have to say playing the NES version would definitely be shorter than 19 and a half hours, if you know what you're doing.
It would be, but I would say it'd be one of the least enjoyable compared to the other remakes and ports. Like, I would highly recommend the Pixel remaster.
Yeah.
Especially just the accessibility alone.
Yeah, of course. But even the NES version and / Famicom version was praised whenever it was released, so it got a 34 out of 40 on Famitsu, as well as a 79% on Games rankings. So people praised the game because it was different than Dragon Warrior, and it provided some things that the American audience was familiar with through games like D&D, where you had a class system that you could choose a class for your character at the beginning of the game. You were also introduced to a full party of 4 at the beginning of the game, rather than slowly collecting your members throughout the game. Some other praises that the game received were the vehicles that you could use to travel around the world, such as the iconic airship that you get much later in the game. Now, the development history of the game is interesting. We know a lot about it. So Hironobu Sakaguchi started development with the game with only 6 other people around 1986. And one of those people that was on the team was Nasir Gebali, which is very evident to you whenever you cross the bridge at the beginning of the game, because they have Nasir's name in very big letters there. But this programmer was kind of a newbie to RPGs, because before this he only programmed 3D shooters and a few other games for Apple II computers. Now, for the development, there's also this urban legend that the final part in Final Fantasy came from Hironobu Sakaguchi having struggles at the time, but he himself debunked that, saying that the reason final was chosen because he was just looking for a title that had a second F in it. So he wanted the title to be abbreviated as FF. He even suggested the name Fighting Fantasy could have been one of the possible contenders. However, it was said by other development members that the studio Square at that time was financially struggling, so that could have had some influence on the choice of Final being the name of Final Fantasy. Final being the first F in the game. Now, the development team was inspired by D&D, pretty obvious, especially from the enemies and the elemental weaknesses, which is something that was unfamiliar to JRPG fans at the time. Tyler, could you tell me about the manual of the game?
Sure. If there's one takeaway you want to have from the manual, it's going to be to talk to everyone.
Yeah.
They really emphasize that in like several pages, like showing you how to actually talk to people, as well as telling you need to do it often.
I mean, you figure that is how you get information. Like, how do you know where to go next? How do you know what to do against certain enemies? You have to talk to people.
Yeah, and like they were definitely going into the perspective of assuming that, I mean, we're basing this off the Western manual, and like they were just going under the assumption that this is a lot of people's first RPG.
Right.
So, I mean, that is something that wasn't common in other games, as we've discussed, looking at some of the Dragon Quest games in the past already. See, one thing I found interesting about the manual was them showing you different layouts of parties you could pick. They show you like just a suggested one for if you're a beginner, or they'll show you ones if you want to go for more of a challenge.
Yeah.
And a lot of other, yeah, for sure. Some of the other stuff in the manual, they go over what different items are, as well as some of the map. Japan got a pretty similar manual to us. Not too much different, really, just a little bit smaller, actually, though. Like, America's manual was 80 pages, but Japan's was only 48.
So, Tyler, can you tell me about some interesting tidbits in this game?
Sure. So, Nasir, known for not making RPGs in the past, I'm just going to throw the blame on him. It's probably not just his fault, it's the whole team's fault. But, like, there's a lot of, like, programming errors with the original release, which is kind of why I was recommending before to play any of the other releases, where they fix a lot of those things and make the game just more balanced and more enjoyable overall, and just more, like, in the vision of, like, what they actually wanted at the time. So, for instance, like, the blind status just does not work. Any weapon that is programmed to, like, do more damage to a specific type of enemy, like, for instance, like, the rune sword doing more damage to supernatural or, like, creatures, they just don't work. You have the intelligence stat, which is the main stat for the, like, mages, and that just doesn't affect any of the damage dealt by spells. And then you have a lot of spells that, like, buff your party that just don't work either. So, like, for the original NES release, it ends up being that your mages are not that useful just because of a lot of these glitches.
But still
Or
necessary.
programming errors.
It's still necessary. I don't think you could beat the game without a white mage. I mean, you
Right. Yeah, at the
can,
very least, healing magic is necessary.
Yeah.
But, like, the black mage, like, because all of these, like, buffs really are almost all locked for the black mage, so it's like, what's even the point?
Attacking magic. I mean, you could just nuke everything at the end. That
Right,
is the name of the spell.
True. All right, so we were going over the manual before with the Japanese and the American manuals. So, Chad, can you tell me some version differences?
I think I can tell you some version differences. So, first off, the money that you use in the game, it's known as gold in the American version, but it is known as the iconic gil in the Japanese version, even in the first release. So we wouldn't get that in North America until later releases of Final Fantasy. That prologue that plays before the main menu screen, you're not able to skip that in the Japanese version. You have to watch the whole prologue, scroll through.
So every time you turn your game on?
Every time. There's also the difference between the clinics and the churches. So in the West, we got clinics, which have a nice heart over their door, but in the Japanese version, it was a cross, because of course everything had to be religious in 1980s Japan. And that also changed the inside of the building. So if you go there to revive a party member, in the clinic you get a nice bearded, bald man, but in the Japanese version you get a bishop. That's pretty much the best way to describe it.
Mm-hmm.
And then also in the one of the biggest changes as far as the enemies goes in the Japanese and American version is the enemy known as the Eye in the American version, or the Beholder in the Japanese version. So for the American release, it was changed graphically, and also its name was changed because it had too much similarities to an enemy in D&D called the Beholder. So I don't blame them for trying to change that, and I honestly like the design of the Eye more than the Beholder. So
yeah, I could see that.
The US version's I think it's creepier.
It's creepier, but I don't know, I think the Japanese version's cooler, at least to me.
Well, the US version's what stuck in future releases, so yeah.
Dang copyright.
Well, we have some other word and item and just translational changes between the Japanese and US version. So like the 4 fiends that you're sent off to fight against were known as the 4 chaoses in the original Japanese version, which honestly is a good change, because I would be very confused if you were fighting the 4 chaoses and then chaos is the final boss. In the spells, for the spells that your characters get access to, they were using the a and ara suffixes in the Famicom version, so like Fyra and then Fyraga, things like that, which is something Final Fantasy fans would become accustomed to in later releases, but in the NES version, because of the character limits, they just use numbers, so you have like Fire 2, Fire 3, which honestly, for what they had, gets the point across pretty easily.
Yeah.
Most of the enemy names were pretty much the same between Japanese and English, but there were some of these early encounters that had some interesting name changes, although I guess this first one that I'm going to say is kind of, I understand why they changed it. So the first one is Crazy Horse in the Famicom version, but it was known as Mad Pony in the NES. I thought that was kind of a funny change. Crazy Horse to Mad Pony. But the second one is just straight up idiocy from the developers, the translators, I should say, because I have no idea how they could get these two things mixed up. But there's an enemy known in the Famicom version as the Lizard, which is translated to Iguana in the North American version. They could have fit Lizard. They had enough characters. Why didn't they just call it Lizard? But that's about it for version differences. Honestly, I have to say, from all of the version differences I saw in Dragon Warrior 2, this is pretty tame. This is a pretty tame translation.
Yeah, definitely. I guess they didn't go out of hand with, trying to, change, or the biggest difference would be, not changing, town names and all that.
Yeah, right. So, Tyler, do you have any personal history with this game? Have you played it in the past?
I have. As I mentioned before, I played the Pixel remaster of it just last year. Platinum. I went through all the Pixel remasters and Platinum all of those.
Yeah.
But that wasn't my first time playing the game, actually. I've played on my Wii back when I was growing up, the Virtual Console. I played the NES version. But I never got far into it. I beat the first boss, crossed the bridge, and then I got killed by some ogres, and then I just never continued the game for whatever reason.
Man, those darn ogres. I ran into a few ogres in my playthrough that we're going to discuss later, but...
Yeah, what's your history, though? You mentioned a little bit of it.
Yeah, so, like I said, I played the GBA version. That was my introduction to Final Fantasy 1. And it's a good introduction to Final Fantasy 1, I'd say, because it fixes up most of the glitches, gives you a nice graphical upgrade. And I played that, I was middle school age whenever I played that. And then I got it on my phone whenever I finally got a smartphone, and from there anytime I wanted to play it, I would just boot it up on my phone, and from that I think I've played it probably a dozen times, but I've really only beaten it about 4 or 5 times. But it's still one of my favorite Final Fantasy games. It's just easy to pick up, easy to replay, and because of the party choices, you do have some customizability right at the beginning of the game.
For sure.
Yep.
So with all the customization, you want to go over how some of the gameplay?
Yeah. So let's talk about the gameplay so that we know how the stats work, what they do, and what we need to prioritize. So in Final Fantasy, I have to say they have a pretty beefy list of stats. So you have HP and MP, which is great. Although MP is a little bit weird in Final Fantasy, where it's not actually like a number. It's not like you're spending MP to. I guess every spell has a level, and the levels get their own MP, which is so much different than any other RPG. I see what they were going for, but it kind of falls apart. But anyway.
It's interesting because other releases or for Final Fantasy 1 especially, are just inconsistent with how the MP works too.
Right.
I know the GBA one just has a more traditional MP, just spells cost a certain amount of magic to use.
Yeah.
But the Pixel remaster goes back to the original use for each tier or level of spell can only be cast so many times.
Yeah. This is kind of weird. So the rest of the stats, I mean, they have pretty normal names, but it's still quite a long list of stats for just an NES game. But we have strength, agility, intelligence, vitality, luck, attack, defense, hit percent, evade percent, as well as a hidden stat known as magic defense. So most of these stats do exactly what you expect. Strength is attack power, agility is your speed, which affects your evasion. So I wouldn't say anything's extremely weird, but again, kind of beefy for an NES game. There's also a few elements that are in the game, which is, again, new for these JRPGs, and it's interesting. So they have 8 different elemental types, but the first element is called status, and it basically just is used as a variable for any one of the statuses that you can inflict. So any status you can inflict other than poison, because the second of the elements is poison and stone. So status is anything that's not poison or stone. The third element is time, fourth is death, and then we have fire, ice, lightning, and earth. Those last 4 make sense.
Yes.
But yeah, I don't know exactly what they were going for there with those different elements. I have to say it's kind of unique having time as an element, and we'll see in later games that there is a time mage, but having status and poison and stone as their own elements just seems a little bit out there.
It was probably just how they were having trouble programming things or figuring out what the best way was to program the statuses, if I had to guess.
Could be, but anyway, now that we know about those stats and how they work, and now that we've discussed the development history and all of the knowledge we need to have before diving into the game, I think we're ready to talk about the first hour of gameplay. What do you think, Tyler?
I would agree. So,
all right.
If you are ever going to play, you as in the listener, are ever going to play the NES version, before you even press A at the start menu to start new game, scroll all the way down to the bottom. Actually, no, you don't scroll down. You just hit left or right.
Yep.
And make sure to turn the speed all the way up to max, 8. It defaults to 1, which is the slowest, and you'll have a single turn take at least 30 seconds per battle. And when the enemy or battles have a lot of enemies, 5 to 6 a lot of times, they'll really drag and kind of taint your experience, especially the first hour.
Yeah, I have to say,
and that's what happened to me.
Starting off with a party of 4 makes it so much different than Dragon Warrior 2. Because in Dragon Warrior 2, you're mostly running into groups of enemies of maybe 3.
Yes.
Somewhere around 3. But in Final Fantasy, you can get encounters of up to 8 monsters right at the beginning. I mean, there was one encounter pattern that was 5 goblins that I got.
Mm-hmm.
And that was right outside of Corneria. That's crazy. 5 enemies all at once?
But another thing that was like really slowing me down was, so you have to select individually each enemy you're fighting with each character. Now, if you like you have some weaker characters and like you're doubling up attacking an enemy, if one character kills it first, your other characters are going to waste their turn, like not attack a different enemy instead that's available to be attacked.
Yeah, I knew about that before I played this hour, so yeah, but it's still annoying because you don't necessarily know if you're going to take out an enemy.
Right, well, not only that, too, it's like, at least in my experience, like the turn order was not consistent at all with like my party.
Yeah.
So like I couldn't predict half the time like who's going to kill first or like who would act first and kill the enemy.
Yeah, that's just the wonders of NES programming, right?
Well, Dragon Warrior 2 didn't have that issue. Like, if you killed an enemy, like, it would just select a different one.
I guess I didn't make it far enough in Dragon Warrior 2 to know what it's like to have 2 party members.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, anyway, to start off in Final Fantasy, you're just thrown into the overworld, right? You have that prologue at the beginning of the game before you press like new game, and then you choose your 4 party members. You have seemingly a lot of options, but there's really only 6 different classes to choose from, and then you're just thrown right outside of Corneria.
Yeah, so I guess to back up a little bit, the 6 classes you could pick from are Knight.
Yeah.
You got Thief. You got a Monk, a Red Mage, a White Mage, and a Black Mage. Now the Red Mage is like a jack of all trades. It's probably the most interesting class there is. You got the Knight's pretty standard, just physical attack, like a beefy warrior, just like take a lot of hits, can do a lot of damage, can equip a lot of like heavy equipment. And then you have the Monk, which actually you don't want to equip stuff to as it gets stronger.
Yeah.
Like it's just fighting barehanded.
Just so you know, the Monk is called the Black Belt in the NES version.
I know, but like I don't know, it's just I've been calling it Monk from like all these other games over the years, like it just feels right.
Okay, so yeah, tell me about the Black Mage and White Mage and Thief.
The Black Mage is geared towards doing like magic damage to enemies and like buffing your party. The White Mage is geared towards just healing the party itself and like supporting.
Yeah.
And then you have the Thief, which was supposed to work as a help you run away from enemies. Kind of be like agile, like nimble, but it's not programmed properly, so it doesn't even help you flee battles.
Well, the nice thing about the agility stat in Final Fantasy 1 is that you can hit enemies multiple times. You don't really notice that until later in the game, whenever the agility stat is higher. But if you hit enemies multiple times, you can rack up more damage easily.
Right. Now, that would be nice for the Thief, but the Thief has like such weak weapons that it can't equip that it's still going to be doing less damage than the Warrior.
Yeah, and that's the problem I had with this game, is equipping stuff. So, that actually is kind of a nice segue to talk about as you play the game. So, you're just dropped off right outside of Corneria. First thing you do is obviously go to the town. You know, you want to check out what's in the town. And first thing you need to do when you're in the town is to buy equipment, because the game doesn't start you off with anything. You get nothing at the beginning. But luckily, you do have some gold to buy equipment and spells. And
yeah, surprisingly, like, equipment was, like, pretty cheap, too.
Right. Yeah, it was 50 for a wooden armor and 80 for chainmail. And the enemies outside would give you, like, 30 or something gold. So,
but, like, even the weapons or whatever, like, most of the weapons were, like, 10 gold.
Yeah, you don't see that cost creep until much later. Not much later, until basically the next town, Provoca, like, the second town, you start to see that with the higher level spells.
But, like, one thing that hits you immediately, especially because you have all these, like, new party members, like, trying to figure out, like, what weapons and equipment each of your members can equip, as well as, because, like, you could buy the equipment, and then, like, in Dragon Quest or Dragon Warrior, for instance, if once you bought the item, it would ask you, do you want to equip it? You don't get that option in Final Fantasy 1. So, like, don't make the mistake that I did, where thinking that it auto-equipped and then go into battle.
Classic rookie mistake, but I did not have that issue. Now, one thing that I was kind of cautious with is buying the spells, because I knew certain spells didn't work in the NES version. I just couldn't remember which ones, so I basically stuck to just buying heal for my Red Mage and fire for my Black Mage. And, like, that was it. Because I was like, I don't want to mess around with these other spells, because what if they don't work?
Yeah, for me, I bought Fire for my Black Mage, and I bought Cure and Harm for my White Mage.
Yeah, those undead enemies, all, 2 of them that you can fight.
I mean, hey, it was nice though, because harm does affect every enemy.
Oh, not just undead.
Well, no, only undead, but it
Oh.
attacks the whole field.
Oh, okay. I wasn't sure if there was just a version difference in the NES version.
No.
Okay.
No, I did try it out of curiosity, because it didn't really specify. Well, that was the other thing too. I had no clue what like half the spells were, like buying them.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I could figure out what fire was and like what harm was, because it's going to do damage of some sort, and then like heal, just pretty self-explanatory.
Yeah, that's where reading
like
the
those other
instruction
ones.
manual comes in handy.
Right. But still, that's the other thing too. Like, at level 1 when you start, you only get 2 magic uses, and then you'd have to go to the end to heal up if you want to use magic again.
Yeah.
So it's like the mages really struggle early game. Like, the only class that really excels early game is the knight.
Yeah, especially because the black belt, as you were alluding to earlier, if you don't have anything equipped on the black belt, its attack and defense stats are determined by its level multiplied by 2. So whenever you get to higher levels, it can be more beneficial to just unequip stuff than to actually have stuff equipped on the black belt. But early game, it's better to have things equipped.
Mm-hmm. And then I guess, so I had a thief in my party, and it honestly was so bad, physical attack-wise, like, my mages were doing more damage than it. Like, it honestly felt like a waste of the party slot, and, like, just a detriment to my whole team overall.
So you're not going to do a party of 4 thieves next playthrough?
Not for if it was a different version, maybe.
Okay.
That's another thing, too. It's, like, something we didn't get, or we won't get to, because, like, just played an hour of the game, is about 3/4 of the way through the game, your party will get upgrades.
Yeah.
Or for their classes. And so, like, the thief, for instance, will get the ability to cast some black magic.
Yeah, but it's only, like, level 1 through 3, I think. It's not really,
yeah, but, so, for the
amount.
It gets the one important black magic spell, at least for other remakes and ports, being like the fast spell or quick
Haste.
or whatever it's called.
Yeah, haste.
Well, it's not called haste in the original, actually.
It's called fast, yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, and like that's like the best spell in the game, pretty much, for buffing like your physical attackers.
Well, yeah, because that goes back to what I was saying earlier, how your agility determines the number of hits that you get.
Yep.
Which, in theory, is why the thief should be good. Yeah, so after you make it out of Corneria, after you buy your stuff, if you go to the castle and you talk to the king, you learn that the princess has been captured, and you need to head north, go to the Chaos Shrine to defeat Garland, because Garland has gone crazy. Absolutely out of his mind.
I like how it's kind of set up at the beginning, like you have only one direction to go, but like it's set up as like a literal like intro.
Yeah.
Especially because like after you beat Garland and save the princess, like they build a bridge to give you like a newer area to access, and then you get like a cutscene and actual credits like rolling to like signify like the start of the game actually is starting now.
Yeah, it was an amazing introduction, especially for a game made in 1987.
Yeah, like that. I mean, to me, that's the most iconic part of Final Fantasy 1 is just stepping on the bridge and getting that cutscene, getting the theme or the Final Fantasy theme play.
Yep, main theme. So, how far did you make it in the game in 1 hour?
Not very far at all. So, for instance, first off, I died once or like had a total party wipeout.
Yeah.
Because outside of the Chaos Shrine, there's like enemies that are stronger than the boss himself. So I died very early on and lost a little bit of progress, as well as the fact that I started playing the game at like the slowest speed. So that really just made things awful. So after I beat Garland, saved the princess, I crossed the bridge, and I didn't get much further than that.
I made it a lot farther than that, and I didn't have any issues with having a whole party wipeout, but a few of my members died here and there just because. And then my experience points were not equal. I hate whenever that happens. I need all of my characters to be the same level. So I beat Garland, crossed the bridge, then went to Provoca, the second town, fought Bicky, got the ship. Then, whenever I got on the ship, because I knew you weren't going to make it that far. I knew while I was playing. I was like, Tyler's not going to make it this far. And I did
the minigame?
The minigame. I did the sliding puzzle minigame. I've never done it before.
I have only done it because there's a trophy for the Pixel Remaster.
Okay. Well, in the original version, your prize for beating The sliding puzzle. Do you have any idea what it is?
It's either going to be gold or a potion.
Yeah, it's literally just 100 gold. 100.
That puzzle takes, like, a little bit of time to actually do, too, just scroll through all the, like, pieces. So, like, I feel like it'd just be so much faster to get into, like, one battle.
Yeah, I think it was more for fun. You know, the programmers, or Nasir, added it just for fun, and I think it achieves its purpose. It's literally just for fun. You're not doing it to grind gold.
Yeah. So speaking of purpose for, like, at least the goals of, like, the programmers, is they wanted it to stand out from Dragon Quest, and I would say they definitely did a lot to make it stand out. Yeah, for instance, like, you see your party members actually fighting and doing little animations, whereas Dragon Quest, like, it's like first-person view is you fighting the enemies.
Yeah, I agree. They really stood out. And I also have to say the battle backgrounds were another thing that kind of caught my attention. Like, I know 90% of the screen is just black, but, like, right above...
little trees.
Yeah, right above your top player character's sprite is some background. Usually it's trees in the early game, but later areas where you're inside of a cave, it'll be like cavey.
Mm-hmm.
So I liked the return of the battle backgrounds because we lost them in Dragon Warrior 2.
For sure. I will say another thing that Final Fantasy stands out is just the numbers in general are much higher when it comes to like doing damage, taking damage, as well as like health values.
Yeah.
Just at level 1, I was doing more damage than I would be doing like mid 15s in like Dragon Quest.
Yeah, and that's something we'll see in later entries as well.
To me, it's like for Dragon Quest, like it's almost like Paper Mario and stuff like that. Like you start off with like such low numbers, but like over time, like just small increases like make you really feel the progress in your growth.
Yeah, I feel like Final Fantasy has always had really high numbers.
For sure.
Like, 999 or 4 9s of damage, that's nothing.
Yeah, I mean, especially in later games, whenever you
break your limits.
Yeah, and do 100,000 essentially, or 99,999.
Yeah, in the NES version, you aren't going to be reaching those numbers anytime soon, but you are right that the numbers are bigger than what was currently available at the time.
I don't know like enough about the damage calculations for what determines how much damage you do, but like it felt like there was a significant amount of variability in how much damage I did like with every hit.
Yeah.
Because I don't know how true that is or not, or if that was just me gaslighting myself as I played.
I mean, I don't know the specifics, but like I do know that a standard attack is just your weapon attack power plus your strength stat divided by 2. I'm not sure what randomness goes into it, though. There could be some high roll, low roll kind of effect.
Right.
I didn't notice that. I didn't notice too much variability in my attacks. I could just be misremembering, though. I didn't really pay attention. I wasn't laser focused on it, but I think the battle still felt rewarding. Even though the numbers were higher, I was still taking out enemies about just as fast. Aside from the text scrolling. A lot more text.
Yeah, it felt much better once I upped the speed, but if you make the mistake of going on low speed, it's not a fun time. It's just a slog. And then if you level up during that, 1 speed, I was in, just clicking through the level up more than I was in the battle. That's how long it took.
Now, I also have to say, while adventuring around the game, in the towns that I was in, I noticed that you can push NPCs, which is an amazing thing. I hate old RPGs where you can't push NPCs and you're just stuck whenever they do something. Now, you can't, push them like an object, but basically if you push them, they'll start walking really quickly in the direction that you push them.
Right. So I guess while on the subject of NPCs, it seemed like there was a lot more NPCs to talk to in Final Fantasy compared to Dragon Quest.
Yeah, and that led to a lot more fluff text.
Yeah, I was going to say, most of the NPCs felt pretty useless to talk to.
Yeah.
Or there was quite a few NPCs, at least in the castle, that just said the exact same thing.
Yes. In fact, I just avoided talking to most of them because I already knew where to go, and those NPCs just aren't important, really. I prefer to have few meaningful interactions rather than fluff. Yeah, especially because, if you do just have a bunch of fluff, then you just don't get anything out of that. There's no lore given to you, there's no hints about later parts of the game given to you, it's a gamble to talk to people because you might just lose your time.
See, since I've played more of a lot of the Dragon Quest growing up, all that, I'm used to talking to every NPC and a lot of it being meaningful or adding lore.
Yeah.
So to me, that's almost I'm programmed to talk to every NPC or a lot of them.
Yeah.
But I gave up on talking to most of the NPCs in Final Fantasy 1 pretty quickly.
Growing up playing Final Fantasy is to me as Dragon Quest is to you, but growing up playing Final Final Fantasy, I learned to just avoid NPCs, and that was kind of detrimental to me playing like different series of RPGs later. I just avoided NPCs because I was like, well, what's the point of talking to them? They're just going to tell me garbage.
It's like, meanwhile, like Dragon Quest, for instance, I'm getting excited, like just looking at the bookshelves to see if there's any like books that you could read to get like even more lore.
Yeah.
Let's see, when you went to the Chaos Shrine, did you just go fight Garland, or did you get the chest at all?
I just went in and fought Garland because I know that the enemies in the Chaos Shrine are harder than Garland himself. Yeah.
So yeah, I fought Garland when I first went in, beat him, but then I went back and went to go check out the chest to see if there's anything useful.
Yeah.
And the one thing that like stood out to me the most is that the chests don't have a different sprite when you open them.
Yeah, that is true.
But also half the doors that were in there were locked and said you needed a Mysidian key. So that's setting you up for a little bit later. All these old RPGs are needing a specific key to open doors.
It's a good way to keep your player coming back.
Yeah.
Yeah, I certainly don't have any issues with that.
No, I like it. I mean, there's points when backtracking is too much, but I mean, for these smaller games, like, it's a nice way to break up the pace sometimes. Like, you want to change up things a little bit, go back, just go get some items or whatever.
Yeah, the thing that sucks is whenever they lock stupid items behind these doors. So it's like, you get the Mysidian key, you remember that there's that one door in the Chaos Shrine that has this important thing, and you go there with your key and you get, like, a potion or something really mundane that wasn't worth your time going all the way back there to get it. Alright, so was there anything else in the game that you thought particularly stood out to you in the first?
It's very random, but like whenever you talk to an NPC or like interact with something, like I didn't like how the text box appeared and like made that noise.
Yeah. Meow.
Right. I don't know, just like I prefer the scrolling, I guess, that like you see in like Dragon Quest and a lot of other games. It's text like popping in or like slowly scrolling through.
Yeah, I mean, we don't really see that in later RPGs, so we know what other people like too. Yeah. One last thing that I want to say about the game is the amount of times that I missed or an enemy missed an attack seemed outrageous. Like, I've never seen a game where there's so many misses so early in the game. It definitely felt different than Dragon Warrior, I can tell you that much.
Yeah, it's like you barely miss in Dragon Warrior, or like worst case scenario, you do like 1 damage.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I had the same experience, like, missing constantly. Like, I swear at least either an enemy or one of my characters missed every turn.
I totally agree.
But, like, I wonder if that just has to do with, like, having all those stats and, like, your just hit percentage was too low at the early levels.
Yeah, because you have to factor in that the enemies also have those stats. So, like, you have your hit percent, the enemy has their evade percent, and there's some formula out there to determine how it works. I just don't know what it is.
So, I think that pretty much wraps up, like, how we felt about our first hour. So, would you pay $1 for what you played today?
I would pay $1 again and again to try out all the different party combinations. I think it is a great first hour of a game. You have the fight with Garland, you have the trip across the bridge, and then you even get the ship within the first hour.
Yeah, I would agree it is a great introduction, and there is tons of like replayability and customization. I do think other games do it better, as well as I think the remakes and other ports do it better than the original. So I'm going to say I would not pay $1 for this first. I would much rather just play any of the other ports of the game. Mainly, like, I think it boils down to a lot of it being like just so many programming errors, like making the game not as balanced or not as good as it should be. And I just think the Pixel remaster, for instance, or even the GBA version would be much better enjoyable experiences, and you really wouldn't lose anything by playing those newer versions compared to the original.
That is true. I have somewhat of I don't want to say nostalgia, but I have a section of my brain that likes NES games, and you can only play Final Fantasy on the NES one way, and that is on the NES.
Yeah.
So for your first hour of gameplay, Tyler, how many encounters did you have, and how many places did you visit?
So I only visited one town, being Cornerio, one dungeon being the Chaos Shrine.
Yeah. And
37 encounters, but since I died and like wiped out at one point, I'd say probably like 5 or 6 of those encounters were lost, like progress-wise, since you just go back to your previous save whenever you die, or wipe out as they they call it.
Yeah, for me, I put 3.5 towns because I visited Corneria, Provoca, and I even made it all the way to Elfheim, which is known as Land. But I also visited Matoya's Cave, which is not really a town, but it's not a dungeon either. It's just one area. So 3.5 towns, one dungeon, with that being Chaos Shrine. Didn't have quite enough time to make it to the, what is it called? The Earth Hole or whatever that's south of Elfheim. But anyway, didn't have enough time to get there, so also only visited one dungeon. But interestingly, despite the fact that I started with the text at the max speed, I only had 34 encounters in the first hour, which boils down to about half an encounter per minute. So one encounter every other minute. I'm really surprised that your encounter rate is higher than mine.
So I think part of it too is that instead of rushing straight to Garland, I grinded for a while right outside of Corneria, thinking that other games you would need to actually level up a little bit before you could take on the first boss.
But speaking of leveling up, at what time did you have your first level up?
Well, this is gonna sound crazy, but almost 23 minutes in. Just because, that first death really set me back, and then, the slow speed. Because it was about, a half hour in when I reset the game and turned up the speed.
Yeah, so if you play it with the max speed at the beginning of the game, your first level up should be much faster. So mine was 7 minutes, 51 seconds.
Right. It'll also, too, depend on your party composition. If you had, a party of white mages or thieves, it would probably take a while.
Yeah, that's true. And also, I had no deaths, no wipeouts, I should say, throughout the whole game. So that might have also made my gameplay a little bit faster and why I could level up faster. But I do want to mention that I did have 5 characters that were, I guess, knocked out. I don't know if you can say they died, but they were knocked out and I had to revive them. But no total party wipeouts.
And it's crazy to think, too, that, I ended the game, or my first hour, only level 3 with my whole party.
Yeah.
Even for, Dragon Quest, that's... At Dragon Quest, we were, level 5 or 6. Or no, we were level 7 in Dragon Warrior 2.
Yeah, I was level 7. I was level 4/5. Some of my party members were 4, some of my party members were 5. And so even though it took you 22 minutes or over 22 minutes to reach your first level up, what was the time of your first encounter?
5 minutes, 52 seconds. Not too bad. I could have got a lot quicker, too, if I didn't talk to a bunch of NPCs in the castle and, town.
So, yeah, I had gone into the town and made all of my purchases for my armor and magic and whatnot at the beginning. So, my first encounter was 3 minutes, 48 seconds. I didn't really bother talking to any NPCs. And then through all of those battles, had to stop at the inn a couple of times. So how many times did you visit the inn within 1 hour?
6.
Only 6. I visited 11 times. 11. Partly because whenever you revive a downed party member, they only come back with 1 HP. So every time a party member got downed, I had to revive them at the clinic and then go to the inn.
Yeah, the only times my party any of my members got downed was the time I had the wipeout. Yeah. So I never actually got to go to the clinic to revive any of my characters.
Seems like you'll have to play more of the game to experience that.
Sometime in the future.
In the future, but not next week, because what game are we going to cover next week, Tyler?
We're going to play another game that's pretty similar to the beginning of Final Fantasy 1. You got a party system, and it's a Dragon Warrior 3 or Dragon Quest 3.
All right, I am looking forward to playing that. Such an iconic game.
Thank you for watching today and sticking to the end. We hope we gave an accurate representation of the first hour of gameplay, and more importantly, we hope we inspired you to check out the game and give it a chance. If you liked the video, please like, comment, and subscribe for more JRPG content from us. We have a lot of projects in production, so keep an eye out. Let us know what games and series you'd like us to cover in the future. Follow us on Twitter at encounter_rate. If you want to listen to our content in a podcast format, check us out at the places listed on screen. Links will be in description. We plan to upload to additional podcast sites in the future, and if you have any preferred podcast sites you wish we were on, let us know in the comments. Thank you again for watching. Until next time, have a great day.